Hey there, so this week we're talking about one of the questions that we get a lot. What about socialization? It's the question that almost all home educators get or worry about is how are my kids going to have socialization, proper socialization? And so this week we're going to dive right into some of these topics that are related to this, and Sidra's going to start us out.
So let's talk about what socialization is first. Socialization as a sociological definition is actually talking about developing the habits, the beliefs of your community or the dominant culture that you live in. So first of all, one of the first things I think about when that question is asked is when you're talking about socialization, it's usually in reference to public school, right? And so my question I always answer with a question, and that is that the kind of socialization you want for your kids? We all know it's not necessarily ideal socialization. We often talk to parents who, one of the reasons they may have pulled their child out of public school or decided to home educate is that they didn't feel like that was a positive environment for their children. They may have been bullied. They, it just, whatever the reason, it just wasn't something positive that was happening with their children. If they don't feel safe, if they're always kind of looking over their shoulder, worried about the bully that's sitting next to them, feeling like, they're not liked, or that they just always have to worry about what they say, what they're wearing, like the lunch that they brought for lunch, like if the kids are going to tease them about the lunch, if they're always worried about that, how much are they really learning anyway?
So point number 2 is that we also think that the family itself is being attacked on these grounds as well, because when those who are thinking about bringing their kids home, many people will ask them questions like, well, how are they going to have friends? How are they going to live in the real world, or how are they going to socialize? It's really the question, right? The studies, I'm going to go right to the studies on this one because I like to do that, but the studies are pretty clear that those who are home educated are really no different than any other kids when it comes to socialization. And in fact, some of them might have an upper hand. And there's a couple of reasons for that, and one of the biggest is that they get to feel really comfortable in a good environment in the home. The question then is, well, what about friends? What about socialization? And the answer is, well, they actually get socialization with their families. And I was just reading a study on this that those who are going home and having socialization with their families at home, they're actually doing it really, really well because they get to interact with their siblings, and the siblings are just as interactive as any other friend might be. This idea that somehow schooling at home is somehow worse for socialization is kind of a misnomer, and the studies don't show that whatsoever.
Okay, so now the question is, well, what about an only child? What about them? What if they don't have siblings? Studies show that as long as a child has one supportive adult in their life, they show an amazing amount of resilience. As long as they have that example, they will help them learn some of the socialization things that they need to learn in their life. How to communicate, how to interact, how to show respect, how to show, all these sorts of things that a culture, whatever the culture actually might be demanding, because honestly, what we say socialization in America is different.
Might be a little bit different in a different country.
Yeah, it's different in a different country.
Is when to bow in Japan out of respect, and when to reach out your hand for a handshake in America.
Yes, and it's different. It's different in every culture. Some people might not have a supportive home life, and that is where public school comes in, where they are a support to the family. So switching that around, they are a support to the family in helping that child socialize.
I would add to this that if you haven't been able to tell so far, we live in an RV, and so we actually get to interact with so many different families because we're often in RV parks
from all over.
Yeah. And what's really, really interesting is that almost to a couple, older folks will tell us how amazing our children act. And they say this about all of the families that
Not
are
just ours.
not just ours,
Yeah.
but all of the families that are in the park, and that how well mannered is usually the term that
they know
say.
how to talk to adults.
They know how to talk to adults, and they're
Yeah.
so kind,
Yeah.
and they're so gregarious. There's so many things, words that they use, but they often use the term well mannered. And these are all kids, that are coronavirus homeschooled, and you'll often see, and this is what I see a lot of, is that those kids who are in the home are able to interact with others, but specifically adults, on a much higher level than those who are inculcated in a very public school sort of way.
So our third point for this, whenever you're asked this question, is a homeschool now is not the homeschool of 20 years ago. These children are not living in complete isolation, 2 hours from civilization. They don't have a phone. They don't have this is not the situation that maybe some of us grew up with, where we think, our gut reaction when we hear a homeschool is like, oh, that one kid that I saw once and had no idea how to talk to somebody. That is just not the reality of the world we live in. We're in the information age. When you get that question from somebody, a well-meaning somebody in the grocery line, really, the feeling you get as a parent is, oh, are your children weird? What are your children are your children going to be weird because they're homeschooled? Or maybe you get this from a well-meaning relative, where they're like, you're going to be weird because you're going to be home educated.
Yeah,
and that's what we feel, which, first of all, again, I asked this question with another question, which is, well, what does weird mean?
What is weird?
What is weird? And this is not that home education where they're never going to see somebody, where they don't have anyone to interact with. They don't have any. Most home educators say in a normal year, maybe not a coronavirus year, but they're out. A home education is actually a misnomer, most of them say, because they're out of their home more than they're
at home.
Yeah, they're out of their home doing things more than they're actually at home. They are at the library, they are at a museum, they're in a co-op group, hiking a mountain. They are, they're out doing things and hands-on learning, and it is not it's not that idea that people, that stereotype, that's a good way of putting it. That it's not that stereotype of, an isolated family that never interacts and doesn't learn some of those social cues and some of those things that we feel like is a normal part of development. And that is just not the case. Okay, so let's recap the three things. So the first one is when people ask you, well, what about socialization? The first thing is the socialization you're getting from public school really what you want anyway? Yeah. So that's the first thing. Okay.
Number two is that how can the family do this? Is the family the right place to do it? And our answer is absolutely, it's one of the best places to do it.
Yes. And then the third is this current home education, homeschool environment is not the homeschool environment that most of us thought of maybe 20, 30 plus years ago. It's just so different now. So that being all said, one thing that is very true is that as children get older, usually around the ages of 10 or 11 and then older, they start to need more peer interaction. They need actually more.
They start to desire.
Yes, they start to desire it, and they start to actually need more positive mentors that are maybe adults too in their life as well. And one of the reasons that they are looking for that is kids kind of need practice. They do need social practice. And around that pre-teen age, they do just need to start to practice their humor and practice sometimes
their dark humor.
Their dark humor.
So we're going to give you 3 ways to determine whether or not you have a good environment for socialization for your kids. Number 1 is safe and comfortable. In a place like this, a child has such an easier time actually feeling good about their interactions with others. It's usually when we put them in high pressure situations for long periods of time that children start to break down in their relationships with others. At the school, at Knox, we saw kids interact with each other for years on end without ever having a disagreement. Now, disagreements as in what should we do here, what should we do there, yeah, that happened all the time. But in like the common
argument, fight, like
fights where
bullying,
they were bullying and
like,
stuff like that,
yeah.
you just didn't see it.
Now the second thing that we noticed is, sometimes parents say, well, as long as we do like maybe a play group, or that we meet at the park maybe once in a while. We've seen that's not quite as beneficial as a consistent group. Maybe for younger children, that is enough, just to get out some energy and to play and to practice sharing. But as they start to reach that 10, 11, 12-year-old age, in order for them actually to feel safe, to build trust, to build communication, and to build collaboration, they actually need a consistent group that they see consistently. Well, and especially, you think about some of those children, they're often like on the edges, more of the introverts, that it takes them a longer time. And so maybe an extrovert might jump in right away, an extroverted child might jump right in. But, a good half of our population of children are more introverts, where it takes time. It takes time to build that trust. It takes time to make them feel like they are in a safe place, for them to really start to learn and to collaborate and to be able to communicate and feel safe being who they are. It just takes time. And if that group of friends that group that they're meeting with is always changing, you may never get there for half of the kids.
Number 3, and the last one, is that they need to also try to do something that's a little bit difficult together. And when we say this, we're not saying that they need to learn to dig some holes. They need to do some work. They actually just need to do something hard, and that hard can also be joyful.
Yeah.
And we're talking about typically, and this is what we did at the school to get at this idea. We were always giving them difficult projects to do.
Yeah.
And I shouldn't say we were giving them. They
were
were actually choosing difficult projects,
that
and we were supporting them all the time. And that provided that perfect environment where, after you've built the 16-foot giraffe, after you have, taken apart this computer and put it back together, after you have, project after project that is complex and difficult, you start to really build all of those socialization skills. And so something hard to do.
But those also can be gained. Like, a lot of people have seen this year in a family or in like a small, a lot of people maybe quarantined together with their neighbors. So in those small groups or in a family type unit, that they can gain some of those same skills.
Yeah. All right, so that's all for this week. Remember to subscribe and like this video and comment in the comments below. We will see you next week, where we will be talking about another interesting topic for home education. We'll see you later.
Thanks.